History is not a straight line of progress, but a story of brilliant sparks that flicker and die. This is the tale of 20 ancient inventions lost for over 1,000 years. By the end, you will understand the fragile thread that connects human knowledge across the centuries. We will uncover a Roman device that predicted eclipses like a modern computer and a legendary fire that burned on water. How could such profound advancements simply vanish from the world? What does their rediscovery tell us about our own technological legacy? What forgotten marvel from the past still captures your imagination today? The survival of an idea is far more fragile than the stone monuments a society leaves behind. To grasp how 20 world-changing inventions could vanish for 1,000 years, we must look at the very nature of how knowledge was kept alive in the ancient world. It was not stored in cloud servers or public libraries. Instead, it lived in the hands of a few master craftsmen, in the guarded scrolls of a temple, or in the memory of a single elder. When a civilization like the Roman Empire faced its slow decline, the intricate networks of trade, education, and patronage that supported its engineers and inventors began to fray. The specialized knowledge of how to make a certain kind of glass or a complex geared mechanism simply had nowhere to go. It became a ghost in the machine, forgotten when the last person who understood it took that secret to their resting place. Other times the break was violent and sudden. The great libraries of antiquity, like the legendary collection at Alexandria, were repositories of technical manuals and philosophical works that burned. With them went the only written records of processes that had taken centuries to perfect, but perhaps the most common cause of loss was secrecy itself. In many cultures, guilds of metalworkers, glassmakers, or alchemists guarded their methods as closely as a state secret. This protected their livelihood and status, but it also meant that if the guild was dissolved through conflict or a shift in political power, their entire craft could evaporate within a generation. The knowledge wasn't lost to malice, but to the very human instinct to protect a valuable advantage. We often think of progress as a ladder we climb, each generation standing on the shoulders of the last. But history shows us it can also be a narrow, winding path through a dark forest. A single fallen tree, a diverted river, a change in the weather, and the path is lost until someone stumbles upon it again centuries later. This pattern of brilliant light followed by long darkness is not a series of random accidents. It is the recurring cost of a world without backups, where wisdom was written on parchment, whispered in workshops, and carried in minds that were all too mortal. With this understanding of how fragile the thread of innovation truly was, the rediscovery of each item on our list becomes not just a curiosity, but a minor miracle. The first object on our list is a corroded lump of bronze and wood pulled from the seafloor over a century ago. It was found among statues and pottery in the wreck of a Roman cargo ship near the Greek island of Antikythera. To the divers who first saw it, it was just another piece of ancient scrap. But decades later, when researchers finally began to clean and X-ray the encrusted fragments, they saw something that defied every assumption about ancient technology. Inside were precise, interlocking bronze gears, some with tiny teeth cut at exact angles. This was the Antikythera Mechanism, a device crafted around 100 years before the Common Era. It was not a tool for war or a simple timekeeper. It was a portable cosmos made of metal, a hand-cranked model of the heavens. By turning a handle on its side, a user could advance a series of dials and pointers to show the positions of the sun, the moon, and the 5 known planets across the zodiac. It could predict lunar and solar eclipses, track the cycles of athletic games like the Olympics, and even account for the moon's irregular orbit with a clever pin and slot gear that mimicked its speeding up and slowing down. This was not mere stargazing. It was a precise, mechanical expression of celestial mathematics, a physical computer that calculated the future movements of the sky. The sophistication is breathtaking. The smallest gears have teeth barely a millimeter wide, and the entire system displays an understanding of gear ratios and astronomical cycles that historians once believed were impossible for its time. The most haunting part is not what it could do, but what its existence implies. Such a device does not appear from nowhere. Its flawless engineering suggests it came from a workshop, part of a tradition. There must have been teachers who knew the math, craftsmen who could cut the gears, and other devices, perhaps even more advanced, that have been lost forever. Then the knowledge vanished. For over 1,000 years, nothing of similar mechanical complexity appears in the historical record. The gears of progress quite literally stopped turning. When geared astronomical clocks finally re-emerged in Europe during the 14th century, they were celebrated as a pinnacle of medieval ingenuity. Yet here was proof that the ancient Greeks had not just imagined such machines, they had built them, only to have that entire branch of engineering sink beneath the waves of history. The Antikythera Mechanism is a ghost from a road not taken, a single surviving page from a vast manual of ancient science that was burned, lost, or simply forgotten. While the Antikythera Mechanism was a tool for understanding the cosmos, the next lost invention was designed to command the very elements in defense of an empire. It was known as Greek fire, and for over 7 centuries it was the ultimate naval weapon of the Byzantine Empire. Imagine a substance that could be sprayed from the prows of ships, a liquid flame that clung to wooden hulls and sails, that roared and crackled with terrifying intensity, and most astonishingly, that burned even as it floated on the surface of the sea. Water could not quench it. It seemed like sorcery, a gift from the heavens to protect the great city of Constantinople. Historical accounts from besieged enemies describe walls of fire on the water, a psychological weapon as much as a physical one that turned the tide of countless naval battles and saved the empire from conquest time and again. The secret of its composition was guarded with a fervor unmatched by any other state secret. Knowledge was compartmentalized, with different families or guilds responsible for separate ingredients or parts of the delivery system, which involved pressurized bronze siphons mounted on ships. The formula, believed by modern historians to be a volatile cocktail of crude petroleum, quicklime, and possibly other resins or chemicals, was never written down in any surviving document. It was passed orally, a sacred trust from one generation of custodians to the next, and then the empire that it protected for so long finally fell. With the collapse of Constantinople in the 15th century, the last living masters of Greek fire likely perished or were scattered, and the precise formula and engineering of the siphons vanished into history. For centuries afterward, chemists and military engineers tried to reverse engineer the legendary weapon, but the true, battle-proven recipe was gone. Its legacy is a profound paradox. This invention was so effective, so devastatingly successful, that the very measures taken to protect it ensured its ultimate extinction. The secret was kept too well. In its loss, we see how a technology can become inseparable from the civilization that births it. When that civilization fades, the technology can fade with it, leaving behind only awe-inspiring legends and a lingering question. Modern napalm provides a distant, haunting echo of its principle, but the original Greek fire remains one of history's most powerful and enduring mysteries. A literal flame of ingenuity that was snuffed out by the passage of time and the fall of an empire. The Pantheon in Rome has stood under the open sky for nearly 2,000 years, its vast concrete dome a perfect, unsupported hemisphere. While the secrets of Greek fire were lost to protect an empire, the formula for the very stone of Rome faded through a slow, quiet forgetting. This is the story of Roman concrete, an invention whose monumental results still define skylines across Europe and the Mediterranean, yet whose recipe vanished for over a millennium. The aqueducts that carried water for miles, the sprawling harbor of ports that sheltered entire fleets, and those iconic, enduring structures were all built with a material that seems to defy logic. Modern concrete, for all our advanced chemistry, often weakens and cracks within decades, especially when exposed to seawater. But Roman maritime concrete did the opposite. Submerged blocks in ancient breakwaters have grown harder over the centuries, fused into a single, rocky mass by the sea itself. The key was not in superior force, but in a clever partnership with nature. Roman engineers used a specific volcanic ash called pozzolana, mixed with lime and rubble. When combined with seawater, this mixture triggers a slow, stable chemical reaction that forms rare, interlocking minerals, effectively allowing the concrete to heal its own tiny fractures over time. It was a self-strengthening material, yet after the complex administrative and trade networks of the empire dissolved, this sophisticated recipe degraded into simpler, less effective versions. The knowledge of where to source the perfect ash, the precise ratios for different applications, and the understanding of the chemistry itself retreated into obscurity. Medieval builders gazing up at the Pantheon's impossible dome saw only a marvel of the old world, not a reproducible recipe. They used what knowledge they had, but their structures lacked the legendary endurance. For centuries, the secret of this ancient supermaterial was literally in plain sight, etched into the landscape, yet completely out of reach. Its full scientific principles were only unraveled in recent decades by materials scientists using advanced microscopy. They discovered that the Roman method was not just different, it was in some ways fundamentally better for certain environments. The loss of Roman concrete teaches a subtle but powerful lesson. An invention is not just its physical form or its instructions. It is the entire ecosystem that sustains it: the supply chains, the trained artisans, the passing of nuanced, practical knowledge from master to apprentice. When that ecosystem collapses, even the most visible and solid achievements can become silent monuments to a forgotten craft. We walk among the ruins of their ingenuity, while the full depth of their understanding had to be painstakingly rediscovered, piece by piece, from the stones they left behind. A blade forged in fire could bend like a willow branch and yet slice through a falling silk scarf. This was the legend of Damascus steel, a metal that combined seemingly impossible qualities. Its surface shimmered with a flowing, watery pattern, like a frozen stream captured in the dark iron, a visual signature of its extraordinary internal structure. These swords, daggers, and sabers were not merely weapons. They were the pinnacle of a craft that spanned continents, born from ingots of a special steel called woots, which were produced in ancient India and traded along routes to the workshops of Syria. There, master smiths performed a kind of alchemy, repeatedly heating, folding, and cooling the metal with a precision that modern science is only now beginning to fully decode. The result was a blade of legendary resilience and sharpness, celebrated in the chronicles of crusaders and emperors alike. Then, around the 17th century, the knowledge to create true Damascus steel simply faded from the world. The shimmering patterns vanished from forges. Why? The answer lies in the fragile web that supports any high craft. The specific iron ores from India, rich with trace elements like vanadium, may have become exhausted or inaccessible due to shifting trade routes. The intricate, hands-on knowledge of thermal cycling, knowing exactly when to quench the glowing metal and how to work it, was never written down in a manual. It lived in the eyes and hands of the artisans, passed from master to apprentice in a chain of trust and practice. When wars, economic change, or simply a lack of new students broke that chain, the entire art form could disappear within a generation. For centuries, the secret of those watery patterns was a metallurgical ghost story. It was only with tools like the electron microscope that researchers could peer into the steel's soul. They discovered a nanostructure of carbon nanotubes and nanowires within the ancient metal, a microscopic architecture that gave it both incredible strength and a unique ability to flex without shattering. The loss of Damascus steel is a different kind of forgetting than the collapse of an empire. It is the quiet extinguishing of a flame in a single workshop. It reminds us that the most advanced technology of an era is not always a massive machine. Sometimes it is the intimate, hard-won wisdom of a craftsperson, a wisdom utterly dependent on a specific material, a stable society, and an unbroken line of teaching. When that ecosystem withers, the knowledge dies with it, leaving behind only beautiful, enigmatic objects that whisper of a skill we can admire but never fully reclaim. Some inventions are lost in the smoke of battle or the silence of forgotten libraries. Others vanish in plain sight, hiding their secrets inside objects of breathtaking beauty. The Lycurgus cup is one such marvel. To the casual observer in a museum, it is simply a stunning Roman drinking vessel from the 4th century, carved from a single block of glass into an intricate cage of vine leaves and mythological figures. But hold it up to the light, and the cup performs a kind of ancient magic. Under direct light from the front, it glows a rich, translucent jade green. Shine a light through it from behind, and the entire vessel transforms into a deep, glowing ruby red. This is not a trick of the eye or a simple pigment. It is a phenomenon called dichroism, a property of a material to display two different colors. For over 1,500 years, this cup stood as a solitary, beautiful enigma. How could Roman artisans, working nearly 2 millennia ago, possibly have engineered glass at such a fundamental level? The answer, uncovered only in the 1990s with the advent of powerful electron microscopes, is as shocking as the effect itself. The glass contains infinitesimal particles of gold and silver, ground so finely that they measure only about 50 nanometers across. That is roughly 1,000 times smaller than a grain of salt. At this scale, known as the nanoscale, metals behave in strange ways. These colloidal particles scatter and absorb light in specific ways, interacting with the photons to produce the dramatic color shift from green to red. The Roman craftsmen had, entirely through empirical trial and error, stumbled upon the principles of nanotechnology. They were manipulating matter at a scale invisible to the human eye, achieving an effect that modern science could not explain until the 20th century. The method for creating this dichroic glass was a closely guarded secret of a specialized workshop, a secret that died with its last masters. No other complete example of this specific technology survives. Its loss speaks to a different kind of fragility than the collapse of an empire. This was the extinction of a boutique art, an extreme specialization that required not just skill, but a deep, intuitive understanding of materials that bordered on alchemy. They knew that adding a tiny, precise amount of precious metal dust to the molten glass under the right conditions would yield this miraculous result, but the why remained a mystery for centuries. The Lycurgus cup is a ghost in the gallery, a single, perfect artifact from a road of material science that was explored and then completely abandoned. It challenges our timeline of discovery, proving that ancient innovators could reach peaks of technical sophistication that would not be climbed again for generations. Its silent, shifting colors are a permanent reminder that some of history's most advanced technology can be held in the palm of your hand, if only you know how to look at it. A single, unassuming clay pot sits in a museum case, looking more like a forgotten kitchen jar than a revolutionary device. Found near Baghdad and dating to the Parthian or Sasanian period, roughly 2,000 years ago, this object consists of nothing more than a clay vessel, a copper cylinder, and an iron rod. Yet when it was first examined in the 1930s, a startling hypothesis emerged. If the jar was filled with an acidic liquid like vinegar or wine, the setup would create a basic chemical reaction between the two dissimilar metals. This reaction would generate a small but measurable electric charge, a weak current flowing between the iron and the copper. In essence, it could have functioned as a primitive battery, predating the official invention of the voltaic pile by Alessandro Volta in the year 1800 by nearly 2 millennia. The implications are dizzying. What could an ancient civilization have done with such a trickle of electricity? Some researchers suggest it might have been used for electroplating, to deposit a thin layer of gold or silver onto other objects, a practice known from the region. Others propose it could have been employed for medicinal purposes, a tingle to soothe muscles, or even within a temple to create a mysterious sensation during a ceremonial practice, making a metal idol seem to hum with a divine presence. Yet here lies the profound mystery. Dozens of these curious jars have been found, but no wires, no connected devices, no clear instructions for their use survive. They exist as archaeological outliers, a spark of electrochemical intuition that never caught fire. Unlike the Antikythera Mechanism, which shows a clear purpose in its intricate gears, or Greek fire, which had a documented battlefield role, the Baghdad battery remains an enigma wrapped in a clay jar. Its true purpose may never be known for certain, and that is precisely what makes it so compelling. It represents the quietest kind of loss, not the dramatic collapse of a known technology, but the fading whisper of an idea that was perhaps never fully understood even by its creators. They may have stumbled upon a fascinating phenomenon without grasping the scientific principles behind it, using it for a specific, limited ritual before the knowledge simply faded away with the culture that nurtured it. This artifact forces us to ask a different question. Is an invention truly lost if the society that created it never realized the full scope of what they had discovered? The Baghdad battery is not a monument to a forgotten advanced civilization, but a poignant reminder of the countless threads of incidental discovery that have slipped through the fingers of history, leaving behind only a tantalizing what-if. What if someone had connected a second jar, then a third, amplifying the current? What if this curiosity had been passed to a mind eager to experiment and build upon it? That path was not taken. The knowledge remained isolated, a local secret that died with its keepers, and the revolutionary potential of the battery waited silently in the dark earth for another 1800 years to be born again under a different sky. Buried within the ruins of a Minoan palace on the island of Crete lies a different kind of mystery, one not forged in metal or glass but pressed into clay. The Phaistos disk is a simple, round slab of fired earth, roughly the size of a small plate, yet it carries one of archaeology's most stubborn and captivating secrets. Dated to the Bronze Age, over 3,000 years old, its surface is covered on both sides with a continuous spiral of 45 distinct symbols. These are not handwritten marks but carefully stamped impressions made with individual seal-like punches before the clay was hardened. We see human figures, birds, plants, shields, and geometric shapes, all arranged in clear groupings that suggest words or phrases in a language we cannot hear. This is where the invention lies and where the loss becomes profound. The disk represents a snapshot of a specific information technology, a method for reproducible, stamped documentation that appears utterly unique in the ancient world. No other object like it has ever been found, not on Crete nor anywhere else. The very tools used to make it, the set of 45 precise punches, have vanished without a trace. With the sudden and still debated collapse of the sophisticated Minoan civilization around 1400 years before the Common Era, the knowledge of this system, its purpose, and the language it records evaporated from history. Was it a religious hymn, a legal decree, a royal inventory, or perhaps an early form of storytelling? The debate is fierce and unresolved. Each symbol is a locked door, and we have lost the key. This loss cuts deeper than a forgotten machine. It is the silencing of a voice. The Phaistos disk is a haunting reminder that an invention can be a system of meaning, a way to transmit thought across time and space. Its fragility was absolute. Without a community to teach the code, to pass on the meaning of the bee and the ship and the captive, the entire technology of communication became inert, transformed from a message into a mere artifact. We can admire its intricate spiral beauty, we can theorize about its origins, but the conversation it was meant to spark ended millennia ago. It stands as a monument to a forgotten dialogue, proving that the most advanced technology of any age is not just what we build, but how we choose to speak to one another, and how easily that speech can fall silent. A delicate dragon's mouth held a silent bronze ball, waiting for the earth to speak. In the year 132 of the Common Era, during the Han Dynasty, the brilliant court astronomer Zhang Heng presented the emperor with a device of breathtaking artistry and profound purpose. It was a large, ornate bronze urn, adorned with 8 dragon heads gazing outward in the cardinal directions. Below each dragon, a corresponding bronze toad sat with its mouth open, ready to receive. Inside this vessel, according to historical records, lay a hidden mechanism centered on a carefully balanced pendulum. When a tremor from a distant earthquake reached the capital, the inertia of the pendulum would be disturbed, tripping a lever inside one of the 8 dragon heads. This would release the bronze ball it held, which would clatter down into the waiting mouth of the toad below, announcing not only that an earthquake had occurred, but precisely from which direction the seismic waves had arrived. The genius of Zhang Heng's seismoscope was its ability to sense what human hands could not. At a time when the only warning of a quake was the shaking of the local ground, often too late, this instrument acted as a distant early sentinel. Court histories record an instance where the device triggered with a ball dropping to the west, though no tremor was felt in the capital. Skeptics dismissed it as a malfunction until days later, when a messenger arrived from a province hundreds of miles to the west, reporting devastating earth tremors at the exact moment the dragon had released its ball. The machine had heard the earth's groan from a phenomenal distance, yet here lies the profound loss. While Chinese bureaucratic records meticulously noted the device's existence, its triumphs, and its inventor's glory, they did not preserve the crucial engineering details. The exact arrangement of the internal levers, the specific calibration of the pendulum, the precise craftsmanship that translated a subtle vibration into a reliable mechanical action, all of this practical, hands-on knowledge was never written down. It likely resided solely with Zhang Heng and his workshop of artisans. After their passing, the seismoscope became a legendary artifact, a symbol of imperial ingenuity that later scholars could describe but never truly replicate. They knew what it did, but not how it did it. This loss underscores a critical distinction in the history of technology. An idea can be recorded, but the craft of turning that idea into a working reality is a different kind of knowledge altogether. It lives in the muscles of the craftsman, in the tacit understanding of materials, in the iterative process of trial and error. The Chinese bureaucracy excelled at documenting the fact of invention, but the manual for rebuilding it faded away when the last master craftsman took his secrets to his resting place. For over 17 centuries, the concept of instrumentally monitoring the Earth's movements lay dormant, a brilliant flash of insight that had to be independently reinvented in modern Europe. Zhang Heng's beautiful, silent dragons are a monument to a specific kind of forgetting, where the applause for an achievement outlasts the instructions for its creation. While Zhang Heng's dragons listened for tremors in the earth, Norse sailors faced a different kind of blindness on the open ocean. Under the perpetual gray skies of the North Atlantic, with the sun hidden behind clouds or lost in the long twilight of summer, how did Viking longships find their way from Norway to Greenland, and perhaps even to the shores of North America, centuries before the magnetic compass arrived in Europe? The sagas speak of a mysterious tool called a solarstein, a sunstone. This was not a mythical object, but a practical piece of technology, likely a transparent crystal of a mineral known as Iceland spar. When you hold this clear calcite crystal up to the sky, even through dense cloud cover, something remarkable happens. The crystal polarizes light, splitting it into two beams. By rotating the stone and looking through it, a skilled user could find the point where the two beams match in brightness, a process that reveals the sun's hidden position in the sky with surprising accuracy. This was not magic, but a sophisticated, empirical understanding of light's properties, a way of seeing the invisible. The Vikings did not need to know the physics of polarization. They simply needed to know that the crystal worked, that it could give them a celestial fix when the horizon was lost in fog and the stars were not yet visible. This knowledge was a closely guarded secret of the master navigators, passed down through generations of seafarers who learned to trust the subtle clues in a piece of rock. Yet, as navigation technology evolved, this brilliant, environment-specific tool became obsolete. The magnetic compass, while less accurate under certain Arctic conditions, was simpler, more reliable in a wider range of circumstances, and did not require decades of experiential knowledge to interpret. The precise technique for using the sunstone, the exact identification of the ideal mineral, and the nuanced training required to read it faded from memory, preserved only as a cryptic mention in old stories. Its loss is a different kind of forgetting. This was not the collapse of an empire erasing a technology, but the quiet retirement of a master craft. When a more generalized, easier-to-use tool becomes available, the intricate, specialized knowledge that powered the old way can vanish within a few generations. Modern experiments have proven the sunstone's principle works flawlessly, a testament to Viking ingenuity. But we have lost the living tradition, the teacher's hand guiding the student's eye to see what the crystal reveals. The sunstone story reminds us that some of humanity's greatest innovations are not complex machines, but deep, intimate partnerships with the natural world, partnerships that can be severed not by catastrophe, but simply by a shift in convenience. The fragility of glass is a fact so universal we barely think of it, yet an ancient legend whispers of a time when it might have been different. The Roman historian Pliny the Elder tells a peculiar story. An unnamed craftsman presented Emperor Tiberius with a special gift, a drinking bowl made of glass. To demonstrate its wonder, the man threw it onto the stone floor. Instead of shattering into 1,000 glittering shards, the bowl merely dented. With a few taps from a small hammer, he popped the dent out and restored the vessel to its original shape. This was vitrum flexile, flexible glass. The emperor was intrigued, but then asked a devastating question. Did anyone else know the secret of this formula? The inventor swore he alone possessed the knowledge. Tiberius, fearing that a substance more durable than gold or silver, yet as beautiful as glass, would utterly collapse the value of the imperial treasury, ordered the man executed on the spot. The secret, according to the tale, died with him. Now, historians largely consider this story a fable, a moral lesson about the dangers of innovation in an autocratic state. Pliny himself was skeptical, but like many myths, it likely contains a kernel of distorted truth. It points to a realm of lost experimentation in material science. Roman glassmakers were master alchemists of silica, as the Lycurgus cup proved. It is entirely plausible that through some forgotten process of tempering, laminating, or mixing with organic resins, a workshop once produced a form of glass with remarkable resilience, a prototype that genuinely surprised the emperor. The knowledge, however, was not lost to a natural disaster or a broken trade route. According to the legend, it was deliberately and violently erased. This is a different, more chilling mechanism of loss. It speaks to the power of political and economic forces to actively suppress an invention deemed too disruptive to the established order. An emperor tasked with maintaining stability saw not progress but a threat to the very foundation of imperial wealth and power. The story, whether based on a real event or not, encapsulates a timeless tension. What happens when a new technology challenges the old pillars of value? In this case, the answer was a permanent silence. The concept of a transparent, shatter-resistant material would vanish from the world for nearly 2,000 years, only re-emerging in the 20th century with the invention of modern plastics like polycarbonate and laminated safety glass. The ghost of vitrum flexile haunts us with a provocative question. How many other prototypes, how many flashes of genius, were extinguished not by the passage of time, but by the deliberate hand of those in power who feared change more than they valued advancement? It is a loss born not of forgetfulness but of prohibition. A temple courtyard in 1st century Alexandria held a spectacle of steam and motion. The great inventor Hero presented a simple yet astonishing device, an Aeolipile. Picture a hollow metal sphere mounted to pivot between two pipes. As water in a cauldron below boiled, steam rushed up through the pipes and into the sphere, escaping from two bent nozzles on opposite sides. The reactive force of these escaping jets set the entire sphere whirling, faster and faster, a hissing, spinning orb of bronze. This was not just a curiosity. It was a working model of a reaction turbine, a pure demonstration of converting thermal energy into mechanical rotation. Hero had unlocked the fundamental principle of the steam engine. And then the ancient world essentially shrugged. The Aeolipile was catalogued among many wonders in Hero's treatises, admired as a temple display or a philosopher's toy to illustrate the power of air and fire. Its potential to do real work, to drive machinery, to pump water or turn millstones was never pursued. Why would it be? The Greco-Roman economy was built on a different kind of engine, one that was readily available and required no complex metalworking, no fuel beyond simple sustenance, and no mechanical maintenance, the labor of enslaved individuals. When human power is abundant and cheap, the economic incentive to develop labor-saving machines evaporates. The steam was there, the principle was understood, but the spark of necessity never caught. So the knowledge of Hero's spinning sphere was preserved on papyrus, a technical footnote for scholars, while its world-changing implication slept for nearly 1,700 years. It had to be independently rediscovered piece by piece in a Europe where labor was becoming more expensive and the demand for consistent, powerful mechanical work was exploding. This is perhaps history's most poignant case of a road not taken. The invention existed in full, yet the society that created it lacked the catalyst, the pressing need, to walk down the path it revealed. The Aeolipile stands as a haunting monument to a simple truth: technology does not advance in a vacuum. It is a dialogue between human ingenuity and the specific pressures, values, and costs of the world it inhabits. Sometimes the idea arrives centuries too early, and the world is simply not ready to listen. The search for relief from suffering is one of humanity's oldest stories. Long before modern pharmacology, ancient texts spoke of substances so powerful they could lift the weight of sorrow itself. Homer's Odyssey describes a mysterious Egyptian drug called Nepenthe, a potion of such profound effect that when mixed into wine, it could make a person forget all grief and pain. While wrapped in the language of epic poetry, this reference points to a deeper, more tangible loss, the potential disappearance of a sophisticated ancient analgesic. Historians and classicists have long debated what real-world substance might have inspired this legend. Some suggest a particularly potent preparation of opium, known to the ancient world and capable of inducing deep sedation and euphoria. Others point to complex herbal blends incorporating henbane, mandrake, or other psychoactive plants, mixed in precise ratios by skilled healers to create a powerful, mind-altering remedy. This knowledge was not stored in public hospitals, but held within families or guilds of physicians, passed from master to apprentice through direct demonstration and oral tradition. The recipe was a living secret dependent on recognizing the correct plants, knowing the exact time of harvest, and mastering the delicate process of extraction and combination. When wars, migrations, or cultural shifts disrupted these fragile lineages, the specific formula could vanish in a single generation. The loss of Nepenthe, whether a real compound or a symbolic ideal, represents a profound reset in the long history of medicine. After the classical world faded, much of this specialized pharmacological wisdom in the West became fragmented or was actively suppressed by changing religious and medical authorities. The quest for effective, consistent pain management had to start again from scattered remnants and trial and error centuries later. This forgotten invention highlights a quiet tragedy of history. It was not a machine that broke, but a recipe that faded from memory, a comfort that slipped through the fingers of time, leaving behind only the echo of its promise in a poet's verse. The strength of an empire is often measured in its monuments, but its true foundation lies in the furrowed earth. While emperors built with concrete, the Roman farmer wielded a tool of quiet revolution, the caruca. This was no simple scratching stick dragged across a sun-baked Mediterranean field. It was a heavy, wheeled plow of formidable engineering, equipped with a sharp iron coulter to slice vertically into the sod, a share to cut the roots horizontally, and a curved moldboard to lift, turn, and aerate the dense, wet soil of northern European plains. This single invention transformed agriculture. By inverting the earth, it buried weeds for compost, improved drainage, and brought fresh nutrients to the surface, boosting crop yields in regions once considered marginal. It enabled the systematic cultivation of vast, fertile tracts of land that fed the legions and the growing cities of the frontier provinces. The caruca was a masterpiece of applied science, a direct response to an environmental challenge, and it worked. Then, the networks that sustained it began to unravel. The Roman system was a complex web, a logistical marvel that supplied standardized iron parts from centralized workshops to distant farms via secure roads and predictable trade. With the empire's political collapse, that web tore apart. Iron became scarce and expensive, the roads fell into disrepair, and the specialized knowledge of maintaining and replicating the heavy plow's design fragmented. In many regions, farmers reverted to the simpler, lighter ard, a tool adequate for the dry, thin soils of the south, but woefully inefficient for the rich, heavy loam of the north. Productivity plummeted. The knowledge of how to efficiently feed a large, settled population from challenging land did not vanish in a single moment, but it eroded over generations, a slow forgetting born of isolation and hardship. The consequence was a centuries-long setback in European farming capability, a period where communities struggled to extract enough surplus from the land to support growth or innovation. The caruca's story is a profound lesson in the vulnerability of the mundane. The most spectacular inventions capture our imagination, but it is often the humble, vital technologies, the ones that put food on the table, that most directly dictate the fate of civilizations. Its loss was not the result of a single catastrophe, but the slow fraying of the societal fabric that wove together metal workers, cartwrights, and farmers into a single, productive system. The heavy plow had to be painstakingly reinvented during the medieval agricultural revolution, a rediscovery that once again unlocked the continent's potential. This quiet tool reminds us that progress is not just about brilliant flashes of insight, but about the enduring strength of the ordinary connections that keep those insights alive and working in the world. 16 water wheels turned in unison, a rhythmic thunder echoing from a provincial hillside. The Barbegal mill complex in Roman Gaul was not a single invention, but a breathtaking feat of industrial orchestration. Imagine two parallel rows of 8 massive wooden wheels, each fed by a carefully graded aqueduct channeling water down a steep slope. As the water cascaded from one wheel to the next, it powered 16 sets of millstones, grinding grain into flour on a scale that was staggering for its time. Historians estimate it could have produced enough bread to feed the entire population of nearby Arles, a city of thousands. This was not just a mill, it was a factory, an early and sophisticated example of organized industrial automation where the relentless flow of water replaced the labor of countless individuals. The genius lay in the systematization, the precise engineering of slope, flow, and gear ratios to maximize power from a single water source. Yet, after the Roman administrative and economic structure that built and supplied it crumbled, the knowledge to conceive, fund, and maintain such a concentrated industrial plant faded into the landscape. The physical ruins remained, but the organizational intelligence behind them, the ability to marshal resources, specialized labor, and logistical planning for a single, massive productive output dissolved. For centuries, milling returned to a local, smaller scale, with single water wheels serving individual manors or villages. The loss of Barbegal teaches us a subtle but critical lesson. The scale of industry itself is a fragile invention. It depends not just on technical know-how, but on a stable, complex economy capable of supporting specialization, centralized planning, and large-scale distribution. When that overarching system retreats, the grand machines it built become silent monuments to a forgotten level of ambition. The roar of those 16 wheels did not just grind grain, it signaled a peak of integrated mechanical power that would not be heard again in Europe for over 500 years. The roar of Roman water wheels gave way to a profound silence in India, a silence held within a single, uncorroded pillar of iron. In a quiet corner of Delhi, a monument stands that defies the most relentless force of nature, time itself. The Iron Pillar of Delhi, erected over 1,600 years ago during the reign of the Gupta Empire, is a 7-meter-tall column of wrought iron. It should, by every law of chemistry, be a crumbling, rust-eaten relic, exposed to monsoons, pollution, and centuries of changing climates. It has not rusted in any significant way. Its surface is smooth, bearing only a dark, protective patina and ancient Sanskrit inscriptions praising a king named Chandra. This is not a matter of luck or dry climate. It is a deliberate, masterful achievement of metallurgy that modern science is still working to fully decipher. The secret lies in what the Gupta-era metalworkers put into the iron, and perhaps more importantly, what they left out. Modern analysis reveals the pillar has a high phosphorus content, a result of the unique iron ore and charcoal used in its production. This phosphorus, combined with the skill of the blacksmiths in forging it, encouraged the formation of a thin, invisible, and incredibly stable layer of iron hydrogen phosphate on the surface. This passive film acts as a shield, a self-healing barrier that protects the metal beneath from the oxygen and moisture that cause rust. The craftsmen of the Gupta period had, through generations of refined practice, achieved a perfect recipe and a perfect process. They created a material that resisted its own decay, a goal that modern stainless steel, reliant on chromium, pursues with only partial success. Yet this knowledge was never written down in a manual we have found. It resided in the collective muscle memory of a guild, in the precise choice of ore from a specific mine, in the rhythm of the hammer strikes, and in the heat of a forge managed by eyes that could read the color of the metal. With the passing of that guild, or the exhaustion of that particular ore source, or the slow transformation of society after the Gupta Golden Age, the complete art of replicating this pillar was lost. We can analyze its composition, we can marvel at its chemistry, but we cannot recreate the full, living tradition that produced it. The pillar is therefore a paradox. It is one of the most visible ancient artifacts on Earth, standing in plain sight for 16 centuries, yet it guards the secrets of its own birth with absolute silence. It is a permanent monument to a temporary peak of skill, a reminder that some of history's most durable achievements are forged not in stone, but in the fragile, perishable wisdom of human hands. The silent, enduring iron of Delhi stands in stark contrast to the roaring, destructive machines of war. On the shores of ancient Syracuse, a different kind of genius was brought to bear against an invading fleet. As the mighty Roman navy closed in on the city, its defenders activated a series of monstrous devices designed not by the gods, but by the greatest mathematical mind of the age, Archimedes. Historical chroniclers describe a terrifying weapon, a claw. Mounted on the city walls, this crane-like apparatus would swing out over the water, its iron grapple descending on an approaching Roman quinquereme. The claw would seize the ship's prow or stern, and then, through a hidden system of levers, pulleys, and counterweights operated by teams of men, it would hoist the vessel partially out of the sea. The ship would hang, suspended and helpless, before being violently shaken or dropped back into the water, where it would inevitably capsize or take on catastrophic amounts of water and sink. The psychological impact of this defense was as potent as its physical force. It turned the sea, the Romans' avenue of attack, into a domain of mechanical monsters. The very water that supported their ships became a trap. While modern historians debate the precise mechanics, questioning whether it lifted entire ships or rather used a swinging motion to smash hulls, the core principle remains undisputed. This was a machine of immense scale and sophisticated physics, a direct application of Archimedes' own profound understanding of leverage and force multiplication. It was engineering transformed into pure theater of terror, and then the city fell. When Roman soldiers finally breached Syracuse's defenses, a single order was given: find Archimedes. But in the chaos, the great inventor was lost. With his passing, and with the subsequent sacking and absorption of Syracuse into the Roman Republic, the specific blueprints for the claw, the exact ratios of its pulleys, the precise counterbalance calculations, and the hands-on knowledge of its construction evaporated. The Romans, pragmatic adopters of technology, never replicated it. The claw became a legend, a ghost story told by surviving sailors. Its loss represents more than just a forgotten weapon. It symbolizes the extinction of a certain scale of mechanical ambition in warfare. For over 1,000 years, the concept of such a grandiose, single-purpose defensive machine, a fusion of pure mathematics and brutal utility, disappears from the historical record. Siege engines would become larger, but the specific genius of the claw, a machine designed to humble the pride of a navy, faded into the realm of myth. It would take until the notebooks of Leonardo da Vinci in the Renaissance to see that same fearless blending of mechanical art and martial intent re-emerge. The Archimedes claw was a peak, a demonstration that the lever could move not just the world but the fate of empires, and then the hand that knew how to place that lever was gone. The terrifying mechanical silence left by Archimedes' claw was replaced by a different kind of sound in the heart of Alexandria, one of harmony and controlled power. In the workshops of another genius, Ctesibius, water was not a weapon but a musician's tool. His invention, the Hydraulis, was the world's first pipe organ, and it was a masterpiece of pneumatic engineering. Picture not the massive cathedral instrument we know today, but an intricate device where the breath of the musician was replaced by the steady force of hydraulics. A player sat at a keyboard, but beneath them, a piston pump forced air into a chamber partially submerged in water. This water acted as a perfect regulator, creating a constant, unwavering air pressure as it rose and fell like a liquid piston inside its tank. This steady pressure was then channeled to a set of bronze pipes when the keys were pressed. producing a sound that ancient writers described as majestic and overwhelming, capable of filling an entire amphitheater or echoing through a vast temple. The brilliance was in its control. Unlike a simple wind instrument reliant on human lung power, the Hydraulis could sustain a note indefinitely, and by manipulating the water pressure, a skilled player could create swells and diminuendos, a dynamic range of emotion in sound that was previously unheard of. It was where engineering met art in perfect concert, yet this sophisticated convergence proved fragile. As the complex Hellenistic world that nurtured such interdisciplinary invention receded, the knowledge of how to build and maintain these precise hydraulic systems began to fade. The intricate bronze work, the understanding of seals and air pressure, the delicate balance of water and wind, this was specialist knowledge that retreated into obscurity. The medieval pipe organ that emerged centuries later was a remarkable instrument in its own right, but it developed along a different, simpler technological path, using bellows for air rather than water's perfect regulation. The Hydraulis represents a lost branch on the evolutionary tree of music technology. Its silence for over 1,000 years is a reminder that art is not separate from engineering, that the tools of expression themselves can be pinnacles of invention, and that when the craft behind those tools is forgotten, an entire dimension of sonic possibility can vanish from the world, leaving only written accounts of a sound we can no longer truly hear. The majestic sound of the Hydraulis was a testament to engineering for the arts, yet another ancient pursuit sought to master the most delicate instrument of all, the human body. In the realm of health, a different kind of complex formula was pursued with near-mythical reverence, the universal antidote. For centuries, the most famous of these was Mithridatium, named for the paranoid and brilliant king Mithridates VI of Pontus. Fearing assassination by poison, he dedicated his life to experimentation, testing countless substances on himself and condemned prisoners, aiming to concoct a potion that would render him immune to all known toxins. His final recipe was a staggering blend of over 50 ingredients, from common herbs to opium, and the startling inclusion of minced viper, believed to hold the very essence of resistance to poison within its own venom. After his defeat, the Romans seized his notes and refined the formula into an even more elaborate compound called theriac, which could contain 60 or more components, aged for years like a fine wine before use. This was not mere folk medicine. It represented the absolute pinnacle of ancient pharmaceutical compounding, a physical embodiment of the belief that complexity itself could conquer nature's dangers. Emperors and nobles carried it with them as a safeguard, and its preparation became a solemn, public ceremony in cities like Venice, overseen by the most respected physicians. Yet here lies the profound loss. The true efficacy of these legendary panaceas was, by modern understanding, dubious at best. They likely offered some analgesic or psychological effect, but could not possibly deliver on their promise of universal protection. Their real value was as a system, a vast repository of empirical knowledge about botanicals and compounds, a tradition of meticulous preparation passed down through generations of apothecaries. With the fragmentation of the Roman world and the gradual dominance of Galenic medical theories, which prioritized balancing bodily humors over specific antidotes, the intricate, hands-on craft of compounding these mega-medicines began to fade. The exact recipes were altered, corrupted, or simply forgotten as the societal structures that supported their ceremonial production dissolved. The quest for the perfect antidote did not end, but it had to reset almost completely centuries later during the Renaissance, when scholars looked back at the cryptic recipes with fresh but confused eyes. The loss of Mithridatium and theriac is not the loss of a cure, but the dissolution of an entire school of thought. It shows how the most elaborate empirical traditions, built on generations of observation and ritual, can evaporate when the cultural framework that gives them meaning and authority crumbles. We are left not with a working medicine, but with a ghost of an ambition, a testament to the ancient desire to find one key that could unlock safety in a perilous world. A mechanical armillary sphere on wheels rolled across the palace courtyard, its central figure pointing unerringly south. While Norse sailors looked to the sky with their sunstones, Chinese engineers of the 3rd century solved the problem of direction with a different kind of genius, one that lived entirely within the realm of gears and mechanics. This was the South-Pointing Chariot, an elaborate carriage described in imperial records not as a tool of war but as a ceremonial marvel. Its purpose was deceptively simple. On top of the chariot stood a small, ornate figure with an outstretched arm. No matter how the carriage turned, twisted, or circled during a procession, that figure's arm remained locked, pointing directly toward the south. It performed this feat without a single lodestone or any reference to the Earth's magnetic field. Its secret was a hidden masterpiece of mechanical computation, a system of differential gears of astonishing sophistication. As the chariot's wheels turned, they drove a series of interlocking gears that automatically compensated for every change in direction. When the chariot turned left, the mechanism subtracted that motion. When it turned right, it added. The net result was that the pointer maintained its absolute orientation, a mechanical memory of its original heading. It was, in essence, a purely analog navigation computer built from wood and bronze, a physical equation in motion. The knowledge to build such a device was a closely guarded treasure of the imperial workshops, a symbol of dynastic power and celestial mandate. Its complexity was its own vulnerability. With each violent dynastic transition or period of social upheaval, the specialized guilds of artisans who understood the precise gear ratios and assembly techniques could be scattered or dissolved. The chariot itself might survive as a prized artifact, but the living, hands-on wisdom required to build another from scratch faded when the last master craftsman passed without a true apprentice. For centuries, the South-Pointing Chariot existed in the historical record as a legend, a description so mechanically perfect that many modern historians doubted it could have worked as described. It was only in the 20th century, when engineers with a knowledge of automotive differentials looked back at the ancient texts, that they could finally reconstruct a working model and confirm its breathtaking feasibility. Its loss, therefore, is a story of abstraction. The concept of a differential gear, so central to every modern automobile, was invented, perfected, and then completely shelved for over a millennium. It was not a tool that failed its society, but one so advanced, so niche in its application, that the ecosystem needed to sustain its knowledge could not survive the tides of political change. The chariot points silently to a profound truth. Sometimes the most brilliant inventions are not lost because they are useless, but because they are miracles of complexity in a world that has not yet built a wide enough foundation for them to stand upon. The South-Pointing Chariot's delicate gears were a secret of the imperial workshop, but another project from the ancient world aimed for a spectacle of pure, overwhelming scale. The final entry on our list is not a tool, a weapon, or a formula, but an entire world set adrift. King Hieron II of Syracuse dreamed of a statement that would echo across the Mediterranean, a testament to his city's wealth and power. To achieve it, he turned to the greatest mind of the age, Archimedes. The result was the Syracusa, the largest ship built in antiquity, a vessel so colossal it was less a boat and more a floating district of the city itself. Ancient accounts describe a leviathan requiring the timber of an entire forest, its hull sealed with pitch and tow, and its decks reinforced with lead sheathing. Its dimensions were staggering, capable of carrying nearly 2,000 people, including 600 soldiers, alongside a cargo of grain, fish, salted meats, and luxury goods. But its purpose was not war or efficient trade. It was a mobile palace, a marvel of leisure and opulence designed for a single, legendary voyage as a gift to Ptolemy of Egypt. The Syracusa bowered promenades lined with lush gardens watered by intricate tile channels, a vast library stocked with scrolls, a dedicated temple to the goddess Aphrodite, a gymnasium for exercise, and even a massive bath complex decorated with mosaics. Every surface was adorned with rare woods, ivory inlays, and intricate artwork. It was a floating exhibition of Syracusan culture and engineering, a statement written not on stone but on the sea. Yet its true genius lay hidden below the waterline. To manage the immense challenge of keeping such a heavy, wooden vessel from foundering, Archimedes employed his revolutionary invention, the screw pump. A massive hand-turned screw within a cylinder would have been used to efficiently pump bilge water from the ship's hold, a critical system for maintaining stability. The ship's very construction was an exercise in overcoming limits, requiring unprecedented logistical coordination to source materials, house and feed the army of specialized workers, and solve problems of launch and stability that no one had ever faced before. After its celebrated maiden voyage to Alexandria, the Syracusa, renamed the Alexandris, vanished from the historical record. What happened to it is unknown. More importantly, the collective, hard-won knowledge of how to build it vanished as well. The specific techniques for scaling timber, the calculations for buoyancy and balance at such an extreme size, the hands-on methods for installing and maintaining its grand systems, all of this resided in the memories of the master shipwrights, carpenters, and engineers who worked under Archimedes' direction. That knowledge was never codified. It was a one-time event, a peak of coordinated effort that pushed the very boundaries of what contemporary materials and logistics could bear. With the passing of that unique team and the political changes that followed, the ability to replicate such a mega project dissolved. The Syracusa represents a profound category of loss, the disappearance of a monumental, integrated system. It was not a single invention, but a symphony of them, all harmonized toward an audacious, singular goal. Its fate reminds us that the most ambitious human creations are often the most ephemeral. They demand a perfect, fleeting alignment of resources, genius, and will. When that moment passes, the knowledge of how to reach that peak can retreat for centuries, leaving behind only awe-inspiring stories of a floating city that once sailed, proving that the ancient world could dream and build on a scale that would not be seen again until the age of the modern ocean liner. These 20 stories are not just a collection of curiosities, they are a map of human ingenuity and, more importantly, a chart of its vulnerability. When we step back and look across this landscape of loss, from the silent gears of the Antikythera Mechanism to the faded recipe for Roman concrete, distinct and haunting patterns begin to emerge. The first and perhaps most poignant pattern is the fragility of specialized knowledge. Time and again, we see that an invention's survival depended not on its brilliance, but on the strength of the human chain that held it. The master glassmaker who took the formula for flexible glass to his resting place, the guild of Damascus steel smiths whose last apprentice never learned the final quench, the imperial engineers who alone understood the differential gears of the South-Pointing Chariot. When that chain of mentorship broke, whether through conflict, a shift in economic winds, or simply the absence of a willing student, the technology it carried vanished into silence. Secrecy, meant to protect a competitive edge or a state secret, often became the very cause of its own extinction. The second pattern is the catastrophic impact of broken networks. The Roman heavy plow did not fail because it was a bad design. It failed because the empire that supplied its standardized iron parts, maintained the roads to deliver them, and organized the farms to use them, ceased to function. The knowledge was still there in fragments, but the ecosystem that made it practical had dissolved. Similarly, the vast industrial complex at Barbegal required not just engineering skill, but a stable, centralized economy capable of planning, funding, and distributing its output on a massive scale. When that overarching societal structure receded, the technology it enabled receded with it. And then there is the pattern of the silenced library. The burning of the Library of Alexandria stands as the ultimate symbol of this, but the loss was more pervasive than a single fire. It was the gradual decay of scrolls, the shifting of scholarly languages, the loss of context that turned a technical manual into indecipherable poetry. Without widespread, standardized education and robust, redundant systems for copying and storing information, the written word itself was a fragile vessel. A recipe for Greek fire or the full works of Hero of Alexandria could be on a single shelf, in a single building, in a single city. Its survival was a gamble against time, war, and neglect. Yet for every pattern of loss there is a corresponding pattern of rediscovery. These lost inventions did not come back to us through magic. They returned through two primary avenues. The first was the patient, painstaking work of scholars piecing together scattered clues from surviving texts, often written in different languages and separated by centuries, like detectives solving a millennia-old cold case. The second, and often more dramatic, was the shock of physical evidence. The corroded lump from the Antikythera wreck, the unchanging iron pillar of Delhi, the shimmering Lycurgus cup in a museum case. Archaeology has a way of confronting our assumptions with silent, tangible proof. These objects forced us to rewrite history, to admit that our ancestors' capabilities were far greater than our textbooks had allowed. What does this grand pattern reveal? It shows us that technological progress is not a straight line we climb, leaving the past definitively behind. It is a vast, delicate network, a web of interconnected ideas, materials, crafts, and social structures. A break in one strand, whether a trade route, a library, or a lineage of teachers, can cause a whole section of that web to collapse, sending knowledge tumbling into a dark age that may last 1,000 years. The fall of Rome was not just a political event, it was a catastrophic systems failure for Western technology. Understanding these rhythms of loss and recovery is not an academic exercise. It is a vital lesson for our own time. We live in an age of incredible data storage, of global digital networks that feel permanent. But how permanent are they? Our knowledge today is held in formats that may become unreadable, on servers that require constant power and maintenance, within institutions that are not immune to the same forces that dissolved empires. The patterns of history urge us to ask, what are we doing to make our own knowledge truly resilient? Are we building systems that are redundant, that are understandable across generations, that are not held in the secret hands of a few? The silent gears and lost recipes of the past are not just echoes, they are warnings and perhaps, if we listen closely, a guide. The celestial computer of Antikythera and the unrusting iron of Delhi bookend a story of astonishing human creativity. These 20 lost inventions paint a portrait of a past that was not a slow march toward our present, but a landscape dotted with brilliant, isolated peaks of ingenuity. Their tales are far more than a catalogue of forgotten gadgets. They are a chronicle of knowledge itself, a substance more fragile than any parchment or bronze. It is a journey perpetually threatened by the slow ravages of time, the sudden fires of conflict, and the quiet, insidious force of simple neglect. A library can burn in a day, but a craft can disappear in a generation when the last master has no one left to teach. This is the sobering lesson whispered by these silent gears and faded recipes. Our modern world, with its clouds of data and global networks, can foster an illusion of permanence. We assume our discoveries are secure, built upon an unshakable foundation, yet history asks us a vital question. Are we truly building a legacy that can withstand the tests that crumbled empires and silenced workshops? The preservation of knowledge requires more than storage. It requires active stewardship, widespread understanding, and a conscious effort to make our systems resilient and our teachings clear. As we reflect on these marvels, we must value and actively protect our own era's innovations, not as final answers, but as precious chapters in a much longer story. And we must do so with humility, acknowledging that our ancestors' brilliance still has profound lessons to teach us about the interplay of creativity, society, and the enduring human spirit to solve problems. If this journey through lost history has sparked your curiosity, consider subscribing for more explorations into the forgotten corners of our past. We would love to hear from you which of these 20 vanished wonders amazed you the most. Your thoughts and conversations help keep these incredible stories alive.